Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a close look at something a lot of companies grapple with, setting up a new office. And specifically, based on the material you sent over, we're zooming in on Gurgaon.
That's right. And the sources, they offer a really interesting angle, focusing on the, let's say, the real costs and timelines involved there.
Yeah.
Comparing the standard way of traditional lease with a different kind of approach.
Yeah, exactly. So our mission here is to kind of cut through the noise, pull out the key takeaways from this material, and hopefully give you a much clearer sense of the financial side, the operational side of making that move in Gurgaon. Ready to jump in.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's start where most folks do. Thinking about a traditional office lease. Your sources make it really plain. That per square foot rent you see advertised, that's just, well, the tip of the iceberg.
Right, the classic iceberg analogy. You see that number, maybe 100 a square foot, and think, okay, I get it. But the sources point out there's a whole load of cash needed right at the start. What are we talking about there?
Well, the first big thing are the security deposits. But the good stuff, the grade A spaces in Gurgaon, they're pretty hefty. We're talking like 6 to 10 months rent, just locked away.
Wait, 6 to 10 months. So let's take an example. Say a 10,000 square foot place at €100 per square foot per month. A 6-month deposit. That's 60 lakh rupees. Just gone.
Exactly. 60 lakh just sitting there not working for your business. And that's not all. Often you've got advance rent too, or significant stamp duty. In Haryana, where Gurgaon is, registering that lease, that can be 1 or 2% of the total value of the lease over its whole life. More cash out the door immediately.
Wow. Okay, so that's just to get the keys, essentially. What about making the space actually usable? The sources seem to say the fit out, the interiors, that's where the really big money goes. What does that actually involve?
Yeah, that's often the biggest chunk. See, most spaces you lease traditionally are delivered as what the sources call warm shells.
Warm shells,
Right.
meaning?
Meaning basic. You get like bare concrete floors, maybe a very basic ceiling grid, minimal power points, everything else you need to actually run an office, meeting rooms, cabins, the whole HVAC system, all the electrical wiring, IT cables, lights, flooring, paint. That's all on you.
Everything else sounds expensive. Like building a mini office from scratch inside an empty box.
That's pretty much it. And then you've got to furnish the place. Workstations, chairs, storage units, the reception desk, conference tables, setting up a pantry. Your source actually mentioned JLL data, right? Average fit-out costs across India were around, what, 5,788 per square foot in 2023.
Yeah, and even higher in Delhi NCR, over 6,000 rupees per square foot on average there.
Right. So
Yeah.
you connect that back to our 10,000 square foot example.
Yeah.
You could easily be looking at 5, maybe 6 crores in capital expenditure
Yeah.
just for the fit-out.
5 to 6 crores, that's huge.
Yeah.
And even for, say, half that size, 5,000 square feet.
Still looking at maybe 2.5, 3 crores. It's a massive CapEx hit on your balance sheet. A huge amount of money you have to spend before a single employee can even sit down and start working.
And it doesn't stop at the physical build, right? The sources mention IT infrastructure, too.
Correct. All the network gear, the servers, access control, CCTV, maybe a phone system, AV equipment for meeting rooms. For an office of, say, 100 people, the sources suggest that alone can add tens of lakhs on top of the interior fit-out costs.
Plus, you need someone to actually manage this whole massive project, don't you? The design, the construction.
Absolutely. There are what you might call soft costs. Hiring architects, interior designers, project managers. That adds another 5–10% to the fit-out budget, according to the material. It's specialized work, and it either costs you consultant fees or it takes up valuable time from your own internal people.
Okay, so you've potentially spent crores just getting the place set up. What about once you're finally in? The day-to-day running costs, are there hidden surprises there as well?
Oh, definitely. The sources highlight that the monthly operational costs, the OpEx, can often catch companies out because, well, you're responsible for pretty much everything.
Like CAM charges, common area maintenance.
Exactly. In those grade A buildings in Gurgaon, the source puts CAM at around 15 to 20 per square foot per month. That's in addition to your base rent.
And then utilities, electricity, water.
All on your bill. And think about Gurgaon summers. The air conditioning is running almost constantly. Those electricity bills can be really significant. Plus, you're directly paying for housekeeping, security, maybe maintenance staff, or outsourcing those services.
And things like maintenance contracts for the AC units, the backup generators.
Yep, all falls on you. The sources estimate that these ongoing operational bits, CAM, utilities, maintenance, cleaning, can easily make up 15 to 25% of your total office cost in a traditional lease. That's a big slice beyond just the rent figure.
Okay, now let's talk about these hidden surprise costs the sources flag, the things that really bite you unexpectedly. What's a common one?
A really frequent one is paying rent during your fit-out. Landlords might give you a rent-free period to build, maybe a few months.
Yeah.
But if your construction takes longer, and let's be honest, delays happen, right? Material shortages, design changes.
Yeah, construction projects rarely finish early.
Exactly. So if it runs over that rent-free period, you start paying full rent on a space that's still basically a construction site. You can't even use it yet.
Ouch. Paying rent and paying contractors at the same time.
Precisely. And then there's the wider cost of delays. If your move-in date gets pushed back significantly, you might need to extend temporary office space, which is usually expensive, or there's just the disruption to your business, lost productivity.
Yeah.
That opportunity cost is very real, even if it's hard to quantify sometimes.
And this next one sounds particularly nasty. Dilapidation and restoration. Making good at the end of the lease.
Yeah, this is a big one that often gets overlooked in the initial budgeting. Your lease agreement will likely say you have to return the space to its original condition, basically, back to that bare, warm shell state.
So, you spend crores building it all out nicely,
Mhm.
and then when you leave, you have to pay more money to rip it all out again. The walls, the floors, the cabling.
That's usually the deal. You pay to dismantle everything, dispose of the debris, maybe repaint, fix any damage to the landlord's fixtures. It's pure cost, zero benefit to you, just to meet the contract terms. And it can be a significant unbudgeted expense right when you're probably focused on moving to your next place.
That seems incredibly wasteful, financially speaking.
It can feel that way. Then you've got the smaller but constant upward pressures. Annual rent escalations, the source mentions 5% is common in NCR. Property taxes that might get passed through from the landlord. Plus periodic costs replacing worn-out chairs after a few years, upgrading IT systems. The total cost is definitely a moving target.
And what about the management time? You touched on hiring project managers, but what about your own team's effort?
Right. That's a huge hidden cost. Think about the time your internal admin team, your operations people, maybe even IT and HR, spend dealing with the lease negotiation, overseeing the build-out, managing ongoing facility issues, handling vendor contracts, talking to the landlord.
That's time they're not spending on their core job.
Right.
Supporting the actual business.
Exactly. It's a real productivity drain, a significant overhead, even if it doesn't show up neatly on an expense report under office management time.
So when you add all this together, the huge upfront capital, the ongoing operating costs, these nasty hidden surprises, what's the bottom line according to the sources? How does the total cost stack up against just looking at the rent?
Well, the analyses mentioned in your source material suggest that the fully loaded all-in cost per workstation in a traditional office can actually be almost double what you might pay for a flexible or managed space in the same area. That seemingly lower rent per square foot. It's really deceptive once you factor in absolutely everything over the life of the lease.
Double. Wow. That's a massive difference. The sources really do, as you say, hammer this point home. Just the upfront CapEx and deposits can run into crores before anyone even logs onto a computer.
Absolutely. There's a figure in the source material that visually shows it, this huge spike of upfront cost for fit-outs, furniture, deposits in the traditional model. Often multiple crores just tied up.
Tied up in depreciating assets, essentially. Money that, as you said, could be doing other things.
Precisely. Like investing in R&D, hiring engineers, boosting sales efforts, things that actually drive business growth, which is a neat transition, actually, to the alternative model.
Okay, right. Let's pivot then. Tell us about these managed office solutions in Gurgaon. The source calls them a radically different approach. How do they tackle these issues we just discussed?
So the absolute fundamental difference is this. The provider, the managed office company, takes on the cost and the headache of the interior construction and fit-out. They build the space to your specifications, delivering it turnkey.
Meaning that huge CapEx burden the 5,000-6,000 rupees per square foot. The crores we talked about, it's not your problem.
Exactly. It's on their books, not yours. They essentially amortize those build-out costs over the life of your agreement and bake it into the monthly fee you pay. So it converts what would have been a massive capital outlay for you into a predictable operating expense. Zero CapEx for the client, basically.
And the office comes ready to go, furniture and all.
Yes, typically fully furnished, good quality desks, ergonomic chairs, meeting rooms kitted out, reception area, pantry setup. It's all included. So you avoid the cost, yes, but also the whole logistical nightmare of sourcing, buying, delivering, and installing all that furniture yourself.
Okay, what about those ongoing operational costs that added up? SAM, utilities, maintenance, cleaning.
That's another key difference. In a managed office, those are typically bundled into one single all-inclusive monthly fee. Power, water, air conditioning, internet connectivity sometimes, daily cleaning, security personnel, repairs and maintenance for the building systems. It's all covered in that one price.
So no separate bills for electricity, water, maintenance, contractors.
Generally, no. It makes budgeting much, much simpler. You know what your occupancy cost is going to be each month, with far fewer variables or nasty surprises.
How do they manage that? Bundling everything seems like it could be risky for them.
Well, they benefit hugely from economies of scale. They might be managing multiple floors or even whole buildings with many different clients, so they can negotiate better rates for bulk services like cleaning or security. They can optimize energy usage across the board, deploy maintenance teams efficiently. Those efficiencies, as the sources suggest, often get passed on, potentially leading to a lower total cost per desk than you could achieve on your own in a traditional lease once you count everything.
Right, makes sense. Predictable costs, simplified budgeting. CFOs must like that.
They definitely tend to prefer OpEx over large, lumpy CapEx, especially when capital needs to be preserved for growth. But maybe the biggest advantage, and one that's often underestimated, is speed.
Ah, yes, the time factor. How much faster are we talking? Significantly faster. Your sources point out that while a traditional lease fit-out can easily drag on for 4 to 6 months, sometimes longer with delays,
Right.
a managed office provider can often deliver a fully customized, ready-to-occupy space in, say, 1 to 2 months, maybe 60 days.
60 days versus potentially 6 months. That's a huge difference. 4 months faster.
4 months where your team is up and running, being productive, generating value, instead of sitting in temporary space or dealing with construction disruption. In a fast-moving market like Gurgaon, getting operational that much quicker is a massive strategic plus. Time really is money here.
Okay, so let's loop back to those hidden costs from the traditional model. How does the managed approach deal with those, like the design and project management overhead?
Well, the provider handles it. They have their own in-house design teams, architects, project managers. They manage the entire process from planning to execution. So you don't bear those consultant costs, and critically, your internal team isn't bogged down managing a complex construction project. That soft cost just disappears from your side. And the risk of delays, paying rent on an empty site.
Generally gone. The managed office provider typically commits to a fixed handover date. If they face delays due to construction or permitting issues, that's their problem, their cost to bear. You usually only start paying the monthly fee once the office is actually delivered and ready for you to move into.
Okay. And what about that dreaded dilapidation cost at the end of the term?
Also gone. Since you never own the fit-out the provider, you have no obligation to dismantle it when you leave. You just take your people, your computers, your specific equipment, and you walk away. No reinstatement bill surprises you years down the line.
Right. And you mentioned economies of scale earlier for services.
Yeah, things like shared backup power generators, maybe centralized security monitoring, bulk purchasing for pantry supplies. It all adds up to greater efficiency than each company trying to do it all themselves in isolation.
And the opportunity cost piece, keeping that capital free.
It's a really big one. Instead of tying up, say, 3 or 4 crores in an office fit-out that starts depreciating immediately, you keep that cash available. You can invest it in hiring top talent, developing new products, expanding marketing, things that directly fuel your business growth. The value of not spending that CapEx up front is significant.
Plus, your team's focus stays on the core business.
Exactly. Your COO, your head of admin, your IT manager, they can focus on your business operations, not on dealing with air conditioning breakdowns or renegotiating cleaning contracts. That freed up management bandwidth is incredibly valuable.
So essentially, the managed model shifts a lot of the financial risk, the execution risk, and the ongoing operational burden from you, the tenant, onto the provider, giving you more certainty and letting you focus elsewhere.
That's a good summary. Now let's try and put some concrete numbers around this based on the comparison in your source, thinking about, say, a 50 to 100 seat office setup in Gurgaon.
Okay, so traditional lease timeline. Sign the lease, pay the huge deposit and stamp duty. Then maybe 4-6 months minimum for design approvals, finding contractors, the actual build, furniture delivery lead times, IT setup, snagging, lots of potential for delays.
And during maybe half or more of that time, you could be paying rent on the space already, while possibly also paying for temporary accommodation for your team.
Right. Now contrast that with the managed office timeline the source suggests, maybe around 2 months total.
That's the pitch. You sign the agreement, finalize the layout quickly with their team, pay a relatively small initial fee or deposit. Their build teams get started almost immediately, often using standardized components and processes.
Less bespoke design time, no lengthy contractor tendering.
Exactly. Fit-out moves fast. Furniture is often pre-ordered or stocked. IT infrastructure gets installed concurrently. Branding goes up. And around that 60-day mark, potentially, the space is handed over, ready to go.
Wow. Day 60, walk in, plug in, start working.
That's the ideal scenario providers aim for, even for custom-built spaces. That 4-month time saving. That's getting your Gurgaon operation generating revenue potentially a whole quarter earlier. Huge strategic value.
Okay, now, the money. The source had a simplified 3-year cost comparison for a 50-seater, traditional lease. Huge upfront costs, let's round it, over 2 crore just to get started. Fit out, furniture, IT, deposit, etc.
Yeah, a massive initial cash drain. Then ongoing monthly costs, rent plus CAM, utilities, maintenance totaling maybe, say, 30 lakh per month in their example. Over 3 years, that's over 4.6 comported in just operating costs.
So add the upfront to the operating costs. The traditional total over 3 years in that example is north of 6.7 crore, and that's before any unexpected major repairs or that end-of-lease dilapidation cost.
Now, the managed office side of the comparison, upfront cost, almost negligible, maybe a 10 lakh deposit or setup fee. Tiny compared to the traditional model.
And then just one predictable monthly bill. The source used an example rate of around 15,000 per seat per month for a decent managed space in Gurgaon.
Right. So for 50 seats, that's 7.5 lakh per month, times 36 months for 3 years. That comes to 5.4 crore. Add the small initial fee, and your total 3-year cost is around 5.5 crore.
So comparing the totals, 6.7 crore plus for traditional versus 5.5 crore for managed. That's a difference of well over a crore rupees, maybe 1.2 crore or more saved over just 3 years. Like 20% cheaper?
Potentially, yes, in that specific example. And crucially, the managed cost is largely fixed and covers almost everything, reducing those variable cost risks. Plus, and it's worth repeating, you avoided sinking those multiple crores in CapEx right at the start. That financial flexibility itself has immense value. The total cost of ownership view often favors managed, especially when you factor in all the hidden costs and risks as a traditional path.
It seems pretty compelling, especially the financial side and the speed. So
Yeah.
Are there specific situations where the sources say this managed approach really shines?
Yes. They highlight a few key scenarios. It's particularly good for fast-growing companies or teams whose size might fluctuate. You need 20 more seats next quarter. A managed provider can often accommodate that much more easily than you trying to expand a fixed traditional lease space, or worse, having to move entirely.
Makes sense. What about companies new to Gurgaon, or maybe setting up a specific project team?
Perfect fit. It lets you establish a presence quickly, test the waters, run a project without committing massive capital or signing a long, inflexible 5 or 10-year lease. If things change, exiting is usually much simpler and less costly.
And clearly, for any company that wants to preserve its capital, avoid that big upfront hit.
Absolutely. If cash flow is tight, or if you'd rather invest your capital in your core operations rather than real estate assets, the OpEx model of managed offices is very attractive. It essentially turns real estate into a utility-like service you pay for monthly.
Or simply if you don't want the hassle, right? You want to focus on your actual business.
That's a huge driver. Outsourcing the entire facility management piece from build-out to daily cleaning to fixing the AC frees up your internal management resources to focus on strategy, growth, innovation, whatever your core mission is, not dealing with leaky pipes or negotiating vendor contracts.
And one last one, maybe, if your current lease is ending soon and you're not sure what to do next.
Yeah, it can be a really smart interim solution. Instead of rushing into another long traditional lease, you can move into a high-quality managed space quickly. It buys you time, flexibility, lets you operate effectively while you figure out your longer-term strategy, and who knows, you might find you prefer the managed model permanently.
So wrapping this up, it seems the key message from the sources we dove into today is that setting up shop in Gurgaon doesn't automatically have to mean a huge financial drain and a logistical nightmare, which the traditional lease route can sometimes become.
Exactly. By really understanding the total cost of that traditional lease, looking past the rent to the massive CapEx, the ongoing operational costs, all those potential hidden extras, you get a much more realistic picture of the commitment involved.
And these managed office solutions present a really compelling alternative. They're structured to tackle those pain points directly. Clear, bundled pricing, taking on the upfront investment and the execution risk themselves, and delivering a ready-to-use high-spec workspace without the tenant having to manage the process.
The financial argument, zero CapEx, potentially lower total cost per person over the term are strong. But maybe just as important, or even more so in today's world, is the value of speed, flexibility, and just sheer ease.
Yeah, being operational in, say, 2 months instead of 6 or more, that gives you incredible agility in a competitive place like Gurgaon. And it kind of democratizes access to really good facilities too, right? Even smaller firms can get a top-tier office experience through a monthly fee without needing crores in the bank up front.
Absolutely. So, perhaps a final thought to leave you with. If you're planning an office move or expansion in Gurgaon, really push beyond just comparing the headline rent per square foot. Do the math on the total cost of ownership for the traditional route, factoring in everything, including the value of your capital and your team's time. The sources strongly suggest that for many businesses today, choosing a managed solution isn't just about potentially saving money directly. It's a strategic decision to free up resources, cash, and focus, to reinvest back into what really matters, growing your core business, making the office work for you, not the other way around.